Happy Industrial Water Week, everybody. Trace Blackmore here, your host for the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And we are smack dab in the middle of Industrial Water Week. We are celebrating Cooling Wednesday. And I say smack dab in the middle. It is hump day for Industrial Water Week. On Monday, we celebrated pre-treatment together. Yesterday, we celebrated boilers together. Today is all about cooling. And of course, we've got 2 more days of Industrial Water Week that we are going to be celebrating. And as always, I am going to ask that you do not keep the fun all to yourself. Go out the next time you are servicing your favorite cooling tower today. Get a picture of yourself right in front of that cooling tower. Maybe you say, Trace, I took a picture of a cooling tower last year. Okay, fine. Do a chiller this year. Maybe you did a chiller the year before. Okay, fine. Maybe there is a heat exchanger that you were just very fond of. Get a piece of equipment, take a picture in front of it, and hashtag that to Industrial Water Week or IWW24. I love seeing those pictures. Thank you for everybody that has been doing that this week. And somebody asked me, Trace, I did not start listening on Monday. I started listening on Tuesday. Can I make up a picture? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You can. If you're not servicing your favorite water softener until tomorrow and you want to make sure you got a picture right in front of that favorite water softener, but you couldn't do it on Monday, I understand. I know scheduling things come up. Just make sure you do it this week so we can all celebrate together. And I want to see all your cooling apparatus pictures. I think I said that right. Today, and remember to hashtag those to Industrial Water Week and IWW24. Just a few weeks ago, we were celebrating Legionella Awareness Month. And I always feel weird saying celebrating Legionella Awareness Month. So I have to explain it. We're not celebrating Legionella. We're celebrating the awareness of Legionella. And it's not just Legionella anymore. It's all waterborne pathogens. And that was episode 375 all the way to 379. And it was all about Legionella, all about waterborne pathogens. Nation, let me tell you, these are some of our most listened to episodes. These are some of our most shared episodes. And these are some of our most commented on episodes. And what I'm hearing is people are able to take the information from these episodes and they can now have better conversations with their clients. Or they are taking these episodes and they're having conversations with their team so they can have better conversations with their clients. And the reason I'm talking about it today is because we can't talk about the cooling tower without somehow Legionella getting brought up. And I remember I was at a building a long time ago and they would not say the word Legionella. They forbid that word on that campus. They said you could say the L word, but you couldn't say anything else. And it was because they did not understand what Legionella was, how it was contracted, what they needed to do, what their responsibilities are. And because of episodes like 375 to 379 and all the other Legionella episodes that we've done, people are now able to have better conversations with clients that own cooling towers. They're able to give them information that they can talk to their board of directors, or better yet, they can invite us to talk to their board of directors on what their responsibilities are and how we can all work together. Now, something that was just awesome is so many people during that month of August visited our Legionella resources page, and that didn't go away. Anytime we talk about Legionella, we update whatever we're saying on that resources page. Anytime we hear about something with Legionella, we update that resources page to make it as easy as possible for you to get the right information, to read it for yourself so you can have the right conversation with your customers. So you can go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our resources page, and you can check out all the Legionella resources that we have. Now, of course, while you're there, you can also check out the Industrial Water Week resources that we have. We're going to have pretty much every episode we've ever done on Industrial Water Week, as well as all of the collateral that our friend James McDonald makes to help celebrate this week. All of that is going to be there for you. And it's my hope that you use today to have that conversation with that customer. You know, the one that I'm talking about. You know, the one that doesn't have all the right information. Because here's what you don't want to happen. You do not want that customer to use the misinformation that they have now and interpret a situation poorly. Right now, you're not dealing with a situation, which means it's the best time for you to have that conversation because there's nothing else at stake other than you educating that customer. And now, after that conversation, you can set some parameters in play so that way you can start testing properly. You can start interpreting those tests properly. And folks, please, when a customer says, let's test, and you do not have the proper parameters in place for what to do when that test comes back, urge that customer to work on that with you or somebody else, because if it does come back positive, and eventually it will, what are you going to do? And it's so much easier to know that in advance than to have to point the finger at 15 other people. And trust me, you will be one of the receivers of that finger pointing because we didn't have that conversation. So if you didn't use August to have that conversation, use today to have that conversation. And make sure you send me a picture in front of that cooling tower or whatever cooling device that you deem fit. Of course, we are going to ask you to send that to hashtag Industrial Water Week or hashtag IWW24. Now, I didn't mention the last 2 days of Industrial Water Weeks in my opener. So tomorrow we're celebrating Wastewater Thursday and then Careers Friday. And as always, Careers Friday, people get cakes. And this is my favorite day because this is normally where the most pictures are shared. So today is probably the day you want to go ahead and order that cake if you're going to order it from a bakery, so you can get it in enough time and you can get whatever you want on that cake. I've seen some pretty creative cakes on our hashtags from previous years. So maybe you're going to outdo some things I've seen in previous years, but I can't wait to check that out. Make sure you're following along with those hashtags. And one more time, just to make sure you have it, whatever pictures you take, make sure you share them with everybody. Hashtag Industrial Water Week or hashtag IWW24. Well, Nation, each and every day this Industrial Water Week, we've had some friends stop by and tell us some things about their experiences with the day of the week we are celebrating. So here is another friend.
Well, happy Cooling Wednesday, Scaling Up Nation. My name is Loraine Huchler, and I'm with a consulting firm, Martech Systems. My work in cooling includes proving a novel technology to kill Legionella and eliminate biofilm. That's the PDS in episode 346. Investigating online biofilm sensors, developing technical specifications for bidding cooling water treatment programs, writing guidelines for the Cooling Technology Institute, and conducting litigation support for expert advisory and expert witness services in cooling applications. My most interesting cooling story is the day the facility manager called me to tell me that the chilled water temperature was so high that it triggered the alarm. That is a hair on fire event. But I immediately knew we had biofilm that was incubating the huge population of Legionella bacteria while we tested the PDS system, and it was reducing heat transfer efficiency. Finally, I saw the two events together and said, wow, this is important. And something I'd like everyone to know about cooling is That monitoring and managing biofilm will automatically decrease your risk of Legionella and your risk of Legionellosis infections, not just in cooling water, but even building water. So I see cooling in the future is looking like air-cooled systems in dry climates, hybrid cooling systems in moderate climates, evaporative cooling systems in humid climates, and lots of reclaimed water as makeup. You have your work cut out for you with bacteria and biofilm.
Thanks, Loraine. I met Loraine in person at the International Water Conference, and we've talked several times after meeting on this podcast. I really like how she looks at the different subjects that she studies and how she presents that to an audience. And if you want to listen to Loraine, she was most recently on the podcast during Legionella Awareness Month, episode 379. And folks, if you have not heard those episodes, I would go back and listen to each one of those episodes during Legionella Awareness Month, because as I mentioned on the top of the show, just great ways to start a conversation. So many people go back and listen to episodes. I'm going to give you a couple here. Of course, we're talking about cooling towers, and one of my favorite episodes in talking about cooling towers is when our friend from Evapco, Brett Alexander, came on, episode 137 and 138, and he came on and told us that we were not using the proper terminology that we should when we were speaking about cooling towers and the parts of the cooling tower. So there you go, episode 137 and 138. And one of the things he said during that was we tend to call, as a water treater, everything a cooling tower, and that is not true. Now, a cooling tower would have water that came from some sort of heat source flowing to it inside a building. It drops down through the cooling tower where it exchanges its heat, and then the absence of that heat water goes back into the building to go into the process to pick up more heat from whatever device it's going to do that in. Well, that's perfectly fine to call a device like that a cooling tower, but then sometimes you have the water that's coming from that building is going through a tube bundle, and all these tubes inside a cooling tower device where the outside water in the tower doesn't meet the inside water in the tubes, and we call that a fluid cooler. And then sometimes it's not fluid in those tubes at all. It is a refrigerant, specifically normally ammonia, and we call that an evaporative condenser. So there you go. Hopefully you know those terms, but you can listen to episode 137 and 138. Brett tells us all about those. And here's where this is important. I hope that you have a great relationship with your mechanical contractor, and whoever the distribution representative is for the cooling tower manufacturer, you want to make sure that you have a common language. And let's face it, whoever builds it gets to name it, so we're using their terminology. And Brett does a great job on episodes 137 and 138. Now, you might also want to check out episodes 327 and 328. Those were some of our top-rated episodes last year, and that was when yours truly talked about a cooling tower and specifically how to make sure you're keeping them clean. That episode has been shared so many times, and I love it when you share episodes. So many people learn about this podcast because you said there's an episode about what we are talking about, and I'm going to send that to you. And then they subscribe, and then we have a new member of the Scaling Up Nation. So, Nation, my ask for you to help me celebrate Industrial Water Week is to share an episode out with your team. Make sure your entire team knows that this is Industrial Water Week, and we have an entire week of episodes that we are celebrating together. Share that with them. And there's so many people that are using this podcast to elevate their team knowledge game and they bring this episode or other episodes into their team meetings. So I hope that's you. I know we're coming out with tools to make that even easier for you to do that. So stay tuned for that. And Nation, as you know, I absolutely love working with James McDonald. You may not know, James was the one that originally filled out the paperwork to make Industrial Water Week an actual holiday worldwide. That was James. We get to thank for that. And James just has this way of teaching in a way that's fun. And of course, each and every Industrial Water Week, we celebrate by airing an episode of Detective H2O. So here is the case of the dye job.
Welcome to Detective H2O, the case of the dye job. The misty rain slowly collided with the office windows of Herbert Henry Oxidane, P.I., CWT. As it coalesced and streamed down, the water detective's phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He answered. Detective H2O here, the best water treater this side of the Ohio, solving water problems drop by drop. What you got?
Mr. Oxidane, this is Frank from Food is Good Incorporated. You were down in our neighborhood about 2 years ago, working with the crew on a boiler foaming situation. Remember?
Oh, yes, Frank. I remember. Good coffee. We finally fingered the cause of the foaming to process contamination, hitching a ride back with the condensate from the processing department. You run a tight ship.
Yes, that's us. And the coffee's just as good. Grinding myself, you know. Well, we've got another scene over here going on. It's the cooling tower this time. Something's fishy because we can't get the conductivity up to where it should be. We put the squeeze on the blowdown valve, closed it completely. We even eyeballed the drain, and there's no water coming out of that blowdown line. Zilch, none, zippo. It's got us all feeling jingle brain down here, Mr. Oxidane. Can you help?
I was looking for a good reason to blow out of here, Frank. I'll jumpstart my heap and be sliding your way faster than 2 shakes. Get that coffee brewing. With that, the water detective shimmied into his overcoat, donned his hat, grabbed his test kit, and headed out the door.
Good to see you, Mr. Oxidane. Hop on in. I'll take you to the culprit.
Detective H2O eyed the pickup truck and climbed in. I've been considering getting one of these, but my old jalopy in the parking lot would never forgive me. You might call me loyal.
Well, I can give you a jump start later if you need it.
Frank chuckled.
This up here is the cooling tower system. It's a big one, all right. Multiple cells with a common in-ground sump. Provides cooling water to all the surrounding buildings at Food is Good Incorporated. The conductivity is still way below control ranges. My fellas have recalibrated both the lab equipment and cooling tower conductivity controller 3 times each. They're thorough that way.
As they stopped beside the water system, Detective H2O got out and walked the perimeter of the cooling towers. He observed the blowdown line. There was an air gap between the blowdown piping and the drain, showing 0 flow. The manual blowdown valve was also closed completely. Next, he looked for signs of excessive splashing or drift, but found none. He checked the overflow line and found no flow. The water detective grabbed a water sample, and the conductivity was indeed well below the control range. Well, Frank, all the obvious culprits check out fine. Your conductivity is low. The blowdown is tight as a clam. I don't see any signs of bypassing the fill and splashing outside the basin, nor do I see excessive drift. The overflow line is bone dry. You are losing water somewhere, though. Let's do the math to see how big this mysterious loss is. Asking a few questions about the system size and operating conditions, Detective H2O pulled out his yellow notepad and a brick of a calculator and began crunching numbers. He soon looked up and said, "If my calculations are correct, and they usually are, you would normally be blowing down around 12 gallons per minute. At your current cycles, you're actually blowing down around 33 gallons per minute."
I'm no mathematician, but that's nearly 3 times the rate required.
Yes, when you consider that a typical garden hose flows around 12 to 13 gallons per minute, a 33 gallon per minute leak should stand out like a sore thumb. Either your basin has sprung a leak underground, or you're losing water out in the process of one of these buildings somewhere. Short of shutting down and draining the basins, let's start by following the cooling tower lines into the facilities it serves. We'll need to check every takeoff line, valve, etc.
That sounds like a great idea, Detective. We're at the height of production right now, so shutting down the cooling tower is not an option.
And for what you tell me, this low connectivity is a very recent and sudden phenomenon. Unless something catastrophic happened in the basin, I suspect water is being lost on the process side somewhere anyway.
Let's start with this building right here,
said Frank as he led the way. Frank and the detective spent the morning tracing down cooling water lines and talking to plant personnel looking for the source of the water loss. The detective sketched a process flow diagram as he went along. They covered 2 buildings thoroughly, but when it came to the third and last building, Frank said,
"Okay, here's the sticking point. Due to the proprietary nature of the production in this building, Building 6, we're not allowed in here. The facility manager is quite a stickler for protocol."
We've eliminated the other buildings rather thoroughly. It is most likely in this building. Can we at least talk to the boss?
Sure thing. I doubt we'll get anywhere with her. Well, one thing's for sure, if you don't ask for something, you're never going to get it.
Despite Detective H2O's best attempts to convince the facility manager to let him poke around looking for the water loss, she wouldn't budge an inch. The best they achieved was a promise to have her guys take a look themselves. Calling her on the horn later got the response that nothing was found.
Alrighty then. What now?
Okay, desperate times call for desperate measures. It's time to get this canary to sing one way or the other. Let's make this leak identify itself. Let's put red dye in the cooling tower water, if that's okay with you and your wastewater operations. We'll let the facility managers know, especially the Building 6 manager. Then we'll observe what drains we can for the dye.
I like it.
Putting the plan into action immediately, Frank, his team, and Detective H2O spent the afternoon looking for signs of the red dye. While none were found, strangely the conductivity in the cooling tower system began to climb in the early evening. The next morning, Detective H2O's phone rang 3 times. Detective H2O here, the best water treater this side of the Ohio, solving water problems drop by drop. What you got?
Mr. Oxidane, this is Frank. I wanted to let you know that the cooling tower conductivity held at set point all night long. It looks like we found the culprit.
Yes, it appears we did. Funny how making the water loss undeniable can do that. While we didn't catch the perpetrator red-handed, I'm sure someone is red-faced. In the underbelly and penthouses of the metropolis of Waterville, where the boilers percolate and cooling towers fog, there is one man who works tirelessly to end corrosion, stop scale, fight low-life microbes, and conserve water. That man is Detective H2O, best water treater this side of the Ohio, solving water problems drop by drop.
Scout Nation, I am such a fan of Detective H2O. James, thanks for putting those together. I love it when you give us new ones. The Scaling Up Nation loves it when you give us new ones. Speaking of new ones, we had a new one yesterday. So if you haven't checked that one out, go back and listen to yesterday's episode. And I hope you listen to tomorrow's episode, where we're going to be celebrating Wastewater Thursday. Until then, enjoy Cooling Wednesday, and I want to see that cooling equipment with your face right in front of it. Hashtag to Industrial Water Week or IWW24. Happy Cooling Wednesday, everybody.